Sergeant Corbitt. Where we left off, if there's testimony that Luis Rivera had an old phone number of 305-934-6615, do we have any records that Catherine Magbanwa's handset called 305-934-6615?
We do, yes.
And in all of the records that we have for Catherine Magbanwa, how many times did she call that particular number?
There were 3 attempts.
And what were the dates of those attempts?
The first was June 5th of 2014 at 10:59 p.m. The second would have been July 17th of 2014 at 11:40, and then again at 11:41 p.m.
Those are both p.m.?
Both July 17th, sir, yes, and both p.m.
And so a total of 3 attempts by Magbanwa's handset to Luis Rivera's old phone number.
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
What is the significance of the June 5th, 2014 date?
That was during the June trip to Tallahassee.
What is the significance of the July 17th, 2014 date?
During the July trip to Tallahassee.
What is the next time she, strike that, let me ask you. Any of those 3 calls that Ms. Magbanwa made to the 305 number?
Objection, Ms. Magbanwa versus handset.
I'll clarify. Of those 3 times that Catherine Magbanwa's handset attempted to call the 305 number, first on June 5th, and then again twice on July 17th, did any of those calls connect?
They do not appear to. They're extremely short duration, 14 seconds, 10 seconds, and 8 seconds.
What could that be indicative of?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Again, the person not answering, phone being out of service, or just changing your mind and hanging up. A number of reasons.
After those attempts, what would be the next communication or attempted communication between Catherine Magbanwa's handset and Luis Rivera's handset?
The known handset, the records we've already been talking about?
The new one, yes, sir.
When would the next one be? Not until July 19th of 2014.
And that was the Saturday morning where the handsets appeared to congregate near Mr. Rivera's residence.
That's correct.
And am I correct that that communication between Magbanwa's handset and Luis Rivera's handset occurred after Magbanwa's handset reached out to Anthony Ortiz?
That's correct.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what I've marked as State's Exhibit 183 and shown to Defense Counsel this morning. Do you recognize this document?
I do, yes.
And what does it show?
So this is also a portion of the iCloud returns for Mr. Charlie Adelson. This is the same conversation that we spoke about earlier. This is from the chats section of that report, so it's organized a little differently, but it's the same information.
And is the content identical to Defense Exhibit you previously were looking at?
It is, yes.
Would you agree it's in a little bit more digestible or readable format?
It would appear to be yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time I'd offer into evidence State's Exhibit 183.
Is there objection?
No objection.
All right, they'll be admitted.
Permission to publish?
You may.
Are these messages in order chronologically from top to bottom?
They are, yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with the expression about taking someone deep sea fishing?
Yes.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, I think an allusion to taking someone deep sea fishing or swimming.
Objection, invading the province of the jury.
Your Honor,
Improper opinion.
may I be heard?
It's speculation.
Your-
That's
Have a
it.
seat.
You were asked if you believed, when I was questioning you yesterday, that there was any evidence to support communication between Charlie Adelson and Sigfredo Garcia.
That's
Is that
correct.
right? And you made those determinations based on your own training, experience, life experience, when evaluating the evidence and the records and the iCloud in this case, didn't you?
That's correct, yes.
Did you consider this text thread or exchange between Mr. Adelson and Catherine Magbanua evidence of communication between Charlie Adelson and Catherine Magbanua?
No, I actually considered evidence of no communication.
And why is it that you did not consider this evidence of any communication between Mr. Adelson and Mr. Garcia?
Well, I believe in reading the context or reading the messages here.
Objection, speculation.
You may continue.
The question is asked, did he call your phone? And there's a response, no. Then there's an additional response about going deep sea fishing and an explanation that how nice he was. And the response to that is, I'm serious. And to me, again, that means that she did not believe the response from Mr. Adelson was serious. And she was being serious and didn't want him, she wanted him to understand that. So I'm serious.
Objection, Your Honor, saying invading the province of the jury.
Overruled.
I'm serious. He's driving me crazy. And then the question is your cell phone listed online? And he says, I don't think my cell is listed online. So to me, this means that Mr. Garcia does not know Mr. Adelson's phone number and does not have, apparently, at least an easy way to
Objection, speculation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
that phone number. In addition to the chats being backed up in the call log, or in the iCloud, we also have the call logs. We have other records of communication that may be in there. And a search for Mr. Garcia's phone number returned nothing. There was no indication that there was, in fact, a phone call in this time frame. So, again, I do not consider that evidence of communication.
Based on your familiarity with this case and the evidence in this case, are you aware of any means that Mr. Garcia would have to actually take Mr. Adelson deep sea fishing?
None that I'm aware of.
In your analysis of the records where there was a lack of communication between Charlie Adelson and Sigfredo Garcia, you were reviewing iCloud, phone records, WhatsApp communications, things of that nature.
Correct.
Are the records that you've reviewed consistent with Charlie Adelson's comment at 10:35 a.m. that no, Tudo did not call him?
They are consistent with that, yes.
You have 1 moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you, Sergeant Corbitt. I have no further questions.
All right. Well, give Garcia recross, if you desire, on limited subject of States Exhibit 122 and States Exhibit 183 and Defense Exhibit 12.
Judge, if I may review those.
I'm sorry.
If I may
You want me to?
If I may review those specific.
You want me to tell you what I'm referring
Yes.
to? The traffic ticket
Yes,
was
sir.
122. The 183 and 12 were the iCloud records.
Yes, Judge, respectfully. Good morning again. Sorry.
Morning.
So the traffic ticket that the government showed you this morning was a traffic ticket that my client obtained in a Nissan Sentra, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And that was a Nissan that he rented maybe an hour or so beforehand, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And that shows that he was driving that car, right?
It would indicate that, yes.
Okay. And that's because a police officer pulled him over, took his identification, confirmed his identification, and drafted a citation, correct?
Yes.
You'll also agree with me that 36 hours later, Luis Rivera received a citation as well, correct?
He did, yes.
And he was driving another vehicle, correct?
Correct.
That was rented for him, correct?
Well,
Let me rephrase it. That was rented, but the evidence that we have shows that Luis Rivera was driving, correct?
that's correct.
And that evidence is the citation he received, correct?
Yes,
As well as the cell data that you have with regards to the phone related to Luis Rivera, correct?
that's correct.
Now, the government showed you the government showed you evidence with regards to Charlie Adelson's iCloud, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And iCloud evidence only comes from someone that has an account with Apple, correct?
Yes,
Okay. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad or a limited variety of communication devices, you will be able to have an iCloud account, correct?
you would, yes.
Did Luis Rivera have an iCloud account?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did Luis Rivera have an iPhone?
He did.
Now, to your knowledge, did Sigfredo Garcia have an iCloud account?
To my knowledge, no.
And that's because he did not have an iPhone, correct?
For the handsets that I looked at, they were not iPhones, correct?
But I'm sorry, just want to make sure. So the handsets that were associated with my client, they were not iPhones, correct?
The ones that I've spoken about, no, they were not.
And the ones that you're speaking about are the ones that are related to this investigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You'll agree with me that so Luis Rivera has an iPhone, right?
He did at one point, yes?
And at that point, we're talking about the time frame of this investigation, is that correct?
Yes,
And Charlie Adelson had an iPhone, correct?
he did.
Now, let me ask you this question. Are you familiar with FaceTime audio calls?
Yes,
If there is a FaceTime audio call, is that memorialized in the iCloud?
it would not be.
So if Luis Rivera did a FaceTime audio call to Charlie Adelson, there'd be no record of that, correct?
Let me say, I don't believe that would be recorded. We did not see that, and I'm not sure sitting here exactly when the FaceTime audio calls came in. We're talking about 2014, and I don't know exactly when that service was started.
So just so I have that clear. Is there a way to capture on an iCloud FaceTime audio calls between iPhone users?
You're talking about the substance of them. Is that what you're asking him, Mr.
No,
Singer?
just the fact that a call was made on FaceTime audio.
I'm not certain if the FaceTime call would be captured as a potential call log, because it does populate in a number of devices as a phone call, even though it was conducted over FaceTime. And if it did that, then it would be captured in the cloud.
Did you see a FaceTime audio call? Well, what about FaceTime video calls? Do they show up on call detail reports?
No, they do not.
What about FaceTime audio calls?
They do not.
What about WhatsApp?
In call detail records, no, they do not.
What about Telegram messages?
No,
Skypes?
no,
Signals?
no.
And these are all communications that could be made between iPhone users like Luis Rivera and Charlie Adelson, correct?
Correct.
I believe they've opened the door with regards to the iCloud, Your
All
Honor.
right, let's keep it to the iCloud records.
Counsel for Ms. Magbanowa showed corresponding communication between Ms. Magbanowa and Mr. Adelson with regards to my client calling Mr. Adelson, correct?
Correct.
Pretty short back and forth, right?
It was, yes.
And in essence, the content of it was whether or not my client had reached out to Charlie Adelson, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated when you were speaking with the government that there's no independent evidence with regards to the numbers associated with Sigfredo with Sigfredo Garcia and Charlie Adelson that any communication took place, correct?
That's correct.
You'll agree with me that the contents of this conversation, it appeared that Ms. Magbanowa was concerned that my client, Mr. Garcia, was going to reach out to Mr. Adelson, correct?
It did, yes.
And you'll also agree with me that it appeared that there was back and forth between Ms. Magbanowa and Mr. Adelson, Mr. Charlie Adelson, as to whether or not someone could find his number on the internet, correct?
Correct.
And this occurred April 25th
I believe so, yes.
of 2014, correct?
Yes.
When was the call that Sigfredo Garcia made to Harvey Adelson?
July 1st.
Do you know if Harvey Adelson's phone number? Dr. Harvey
I
Adelson?
think we're getting beyond the scope of what I've allowed you to recross on, Mr. Sangaday.
This will be my last question, Your Honor.
All right.
You'll agree with me that the call to Harvey Adelson, Dr. Harvey Adelson, occurred several months after this initial inquiry by Ms. Magbanua, correct?
That's correct.
Nothing further.
Recross on number 122, State's Exhibit 122.
No questions.
All right. Any redirects on Mr. Sanganay's questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Any juror have a question? It seems like a long time. We've got a question from the jury. All right. We'll go sidebar.
Are we?
You had testified about Charlie Adelson deleting messages that we saw in the iCloud information. Did he just delete Ms. Magbanua's messages, or was he deleting many of the messages with other people?
If I may refer very quickly to that
You may.
result, I can probably give a better answer.
You may review that.
Obviously, there are a number of events in the iCloud, tens of thousands here, so I can filter down to just what has been deleted, and my computer's trying to catch up here, but I see a number of so for example, there's communications with another phone number that's not related that has been deleted, at least one. There appear to be multiple deleted text messages with other numbers, other messages that's not related to Ms. Magbanua.
There was discussion about a phone for Anthony Ortiz. You familiar with who
Yes.
I'm referring to?
Yes, sir, I am.
Did you attempt to plot his phone location for the morning of July 19, 2014?
The investigators did not obtain records for that phone number, so I did not have anything to plot for that morning. His activity that we saw is from the records that we did have of Ms. Magbanua, Mr. Rivera, Mr. Garcia.
Did you do any plotting of the handset locations during the second comfort rental on June 3rd, 2014?
During the second comfort rental,
June 3rd, 2014.
we did, and I apologize, I'm trying to recall. I believe that we looked at that, and I don't know that we did not have location records for Mr. Garcia, obviously, in that time frame. I did look at Mr. Adelson's records and Ms. Magbanua's records, and I did not see events that were consistent with them going to that location. As the car was just being exchanged, it wasn't necessarily.
Objection, Judge. Classification of the car being exchanged. That's not evidence.
Well, that is in evidence. I'll overrule that objection.
I didn't necessarily think that there had to be two persons involved, as opposed to if someone was getting dropped off, then if you're just going yourself, you may not have to have someone with you. But no, I did not find any records for anyone else with locations consistent on that day.
What about in terms of Rivera? Did you look at his handset location for that time frame.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry if I didn't include that. I did his as well, and it was not consistent.
Those were the questions that were asked. All right, any follow-up, Ms. Norris?
One moment, Your Honor. No questions, Your Honor.
Garcia?
No questions, Judge.
McBain?
Just 5 minutes worth. No questions, Your Honor. No questions.
All right. You can step down, Sergeant. Call your next witness, please.
The state calls Mary Hall.
Come on, here, please, man. You would face the clerk and raise your right hand to be sworn, please.
You swear affirm testimony about giving this case to be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Have a seat. Slide up the microphone, please, ma'am. Slide. There we go. May I proceed?
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and your last name?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Mary Hull, Hull.
How are you employed, Ms. Hull?
I'm employed with the Attorney General's Office in the Consumer Protection Division.
What is your current role at the Attorney General's office?
Financial investigator.
How were you employed back in the summer of 2016?
I worked for the Department of Financial Services in the Office of Fiscal Integrity.
And inside the Office of Fiscal Integrity, what did you do?
I was a criminal financial investigator.
What does that mean?
We investigated all fraud, waste, and abuse for all state funds.
In your current position at the Attorney General's office, what are your duties exactly?
We handle more civil. I do have some dual criminal cases, but we cover the Florida Deceptive Unfair Trade and Deceptive Practices statute.
What's your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Florida State University.
Do you have any minors? Like your major?
My major was finance, minor was accounting.
Do you have any experience in analyzing financial data?
Yes, I have 15 years of financial experience as an auditor and a financial investigator for the state of Florida.
Do you have any investigative experience in white-collar crime?
Yes, I have 7 years of conducting white-collar crime investigations to include money laundering, contract fraud, counterfeiting, embezzlement, and identity theft.
And have you worked both with federal and state authorities investigating like multi-agency complex financial investigations?
I have. I've worked numerous complex multi-agency financial investigations.
And what's your area of expertise?
My specialty is forensic accounting.
What is forensic accounting?
It's the very detailed analysis of financial records and data to be used as evidence in a court of law.
Do you have any specialized training or certifications to be able to do forensic accounting?
Yes, I'm a certified fraud examiner in good standing with the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners.
Above and beyond that, did you receive any type of like in-service
Yes.
on-the-job training?
Yes, as a criminal investigator, I had additional in-service training to include search and seizure requirements, the handling of evidence, chain of custody requirements, and the procedures for interviewing witnesses.
Have you ever testified in a court as to your expertise in forensic
Yes,
accounting?
I sure have.
Approximately how many times?
Approximately 18 times.
This time the state tenders?
Court order.
None from Mr. Garcia.
None, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. And eventually you became involved in this particular murder investigation, is that right?
I did.
And what exactly were you asked to do?
To look over all of the bank records and analysis, see if I could determine any associations between the subjects or the possible defendants.
So you're looking for links or associations or trying to see where the money went?
Yes,
Fair to say?
Yes.
An easy way to put it?
yes.
Okay, and what type of records did you review in trying to analyze the financial data in this case?
Mostly it was bank records, but I did have other records available to me.
Okay. What type of, or whose bank records did you have?
I reviewed all of the Adelson's bank records, Katie Magbanua's records, Louis Rivera, and Sigfredo Garcia.
Now, for the Adelsons, when you say the Adelsons, did you review Harvey Adelson's financial records?
Yes,
Donna Adelson?
yes,
Wendy Adelson?
yes,
Charlie Adelson?
yes.
What about any Adelson businesses?
There was numerous Adelson businesses.
Particularly, did you also look at the Adelson Institute
Yes,
business or bank records?
yes.
And what was the range of records that you had for the Adelson Institute?
I believe it was 2013 to the end of 2016.
For Charles Adelson, what particular bank records did you look at for him?
I may have to refer to my notes to be specific, but just generally all of his business accounts and his personal accounts.
And what primary personal account did you rely on?
He had a Regions account that was his primary account.
Did he also have a credit card account that you examined?
Yes,
What credit card account was that?
he had both American Express and a Capital One.
How many different accounts for the Adelsons as a whole did you review?
There was 13 bank accounts, 2 credit card accounts, but there was numerous investment accounts that I partially reviewed.
And why didn't you fully review the investment accounts of the Adelsons?
I actually changed jobs between Department of Financial Services and the Attorney General. That limited my ability to investigate it. The accounts there was 18 different investment accounts, and the return on that was 10,000 pages of information.
Can you move your microphone a little bit or talk a little louder? I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. So you mentioned that they had 18 different investment accounts. And how
Yes.
many pages worth of accounts, investment accounts, did the
There was-
Adelsons have?
10,000 pages,
So you didn't get a chance to go through all of that.
correct.
For Mr. Luis Rivera, how many accounts did he have, bank accounts that you reviewed?
He had a checking and a savings account.
With which company?
I'd have to
I'll strike that. I know I'm asking you a lot of detailed questions. Mr. Garcia, you reviewed his, what type of records did you review for Mr. Sigfredo Garcia?
He also had a checking and a savings account.
Did he also have some employment records that you reviewed?
I did.
From where?
Coastal Masonry.
Now, Ms. Magbanua, what types of accounts did you review for her?
Bank accounts and a couple of credit cards.
You mentioned that in addition to, you said it was primarily bank records, account records, but you reviewed some additional stuff, you said.
Yes.
Did you review Ms. Magbanua's income tax filings?
I did.
Are you aware that in this case there was a subpoena issued to the Adelson Institute and they provided records in response to the request for any employment records associated with Catherine Magbanua?
I did.
Did you review that?
I did.
Did you review any records related to Ms. Magbanua's breast augmentation by Dr. Rudner?
Yes.
Did you review any Broward dermatology records?
Yes.
What about the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles? Do you use that in your investigation to do analysis on your following of the money?
It's one of the areas I look. When I'm doing a financial investigation, I look for assets that have been purchased or acquired as just a matter of rule, see if they bought land or homes or cars. So yes, I did look at there.
You did look at DHS&B records?
Yes.
And finally, did you have access to and review Charlie Adelson's iCloud contents?
I did.
May I approach the witness?
You right?
First, I'm showing you what's already in evidence as State's Exhibit 144. Do you recognize that disc?
I do.
And what does it contain?
Louis Rivera's bank records.
And is that your signature on the CD?
It is.
Is that indicating that you?
I
these are
reviewed the file.
Okay. You said those were Louis Rivera's bank records, right?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Now I want to show you what I've marked for identification as State's Exhibit 145. What does that disc contain?
Sigfredo Garcia's bank records.
And are those fair and accurate records that you received for Sigfredo Garcia in this case pursuant to subpoena?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd offer into evidence State's Exhibit 145.
Is there objection?
Apologize, Judge. No objection from Mr. Garcia.
No objection.
Be admitted.
And I should note on 145, these bank records contain certificates of authenticity from the bank that these are in fact Mr. Garcia's records.
They are.
Now showing you State's Exhibit 146. Do you recognize that disc?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
Has my initials on it.
And what does it contain?
Ms. Magbanua's Bank of America bank records.
Are these the records you reviewed?
They are.
And do they too contain a certificate of authenticity from the banking institutions?
They do.
The State offers State's Exhibit 146 at this time.
Any objection, 146?
No objection.
To be admitted.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 147. Do you recognize that disc?
I do.
What does it contain?
It contains Ms. Magbanua's Chase bank records.
Do you recognize it because of your initial on the disc?
I do.
And are these the records that you reviewed for Ms. Magbanua's Chase records?
Yes,
And does it too contain that certificate of authenticity from Chase?
it does.
The State offers State's Exhibit 147 at this time.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Be admitted.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 148. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Do you recognize it because you initialed the disc?
I initialed the disc, and it's Adelson Institute's Regions bank records.
And are those the records with the certificate of authenticity from Regions Bank that you reviewed in this case?
Yes.
I'd offer State's Exhibit 148 at this time.
Any objection?
No from Mr. Garcia.
No objection.
Be admitted.
Finally, I'm showing you what I've marked for identification as State's Exhibit 149. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do. Charlie Adelson's AMX American Express records.
And you initialed that CD as well?
I did.
And do those also contain a certificate of authenticity?
They do.
And are these the records, part of the records for Mr. Adelson that you relied upon in this case?
Yes.
State offers State's Exhibit 149 at this time.
Is there objection?
No objection.
Be admitted.
May I approach one more time, Your Honor? Now I'm showing you State's Exhibit 87. What is
Okay.
that document?
This was part of the subpoena response from the Adelson Institute for Katie Magbanua's paychecks.
Is that the entire response from the Adelson Institute?
I believe it is. It's got the. Yes, that looks like the entire response.
And does it contain a certificate or declaration of authenticity from the Adelson Institute itself?
It does.
And you relied on these records in preparing for your testimony today?
Yes.
The State would offer State's Exhibit 87 at this time.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Be admitted.
Now I'm showing you what I've marked for identification as State's Exhibit 98. Do you recognize those records?
Yes.
What do you recognize them to be?
Sigfredo Garcia's coastal masonry detailed earnings reports.
And does this Exhibit 98 also contain a certificate or declaration of authenticity from Coastal Masonry?
It does.
And then you relied on these records as well?
I do.
At this time, I'd offer State's Exhibit 98.
Any objection?
No objection.
Be admitted.
I'm showing you what I've marked for identification as State's Exhibit 99. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is that?
These are Dr. Rudner's records for the augmentation surgery.
For Ms. McBanois?
Yes,
And does that exhibit as well contain the certification of authenticity for those business records?
it does.
I'd offer State's Exhibit 99.
Any? Be admitted.
Finally, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 100. Do you recognize these records?
Yes.
What are they?
They are Broward Dermatology's payroll summaries.
And you relied on those in your analysis?
Yes,
And they too contain the certificate of authenticity as a business record.
they do.
The state offers State's Exhibit 100.
No objection.
Be admitted.
Are you aware if there was ever a different financial analyst involved in this murder investigation?
Yes,
Who is that?
her name is Penny Rose.
Do you know where she's employed?
She's with the FBI
And do you know where she resides?
in Jacksonville.
Do you know if she was as accessible in this case as you were?
No, she lives in Jacksonville.
Okay. You indicated that you looked at certain records from the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles in order to look at any assets or
Yes.
things purchased. Which type of, strike that, for which particular people were you looking at assets they may have come into possession of after the murder?
Louis Rivera, Sigfredo Garcia, and Catherine McBanois.
Did you in fact get records for those three individuals?
I did.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 88. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
And what is it?
It is the title for a black Lexus, titled to Katie McBanois.
Does this, is this title certification from DMV a certified document?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time I'd offer State's Exhibit 88.
Any objection?
Only that it's already in evidence.
It'll be admitted.
Now I'm showing you State's Exhibit 101. Do you recognize these documents?
Okay, it is the title history and the title for,
Without telling me the contents, to whom do these DHS&V records relate?
Sigfredo Garcia.
And are these records that you relied upon in your analysis?
Yes.
And are they certified by the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles?
They are.
This time I'd offer into evidence State's Exhibit 101.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Be admitted.
Next, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 102 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes, they are records for Sigfredo Garcia.
Are these also records from DMV that you relied upon in this case?
Yes,
And are they all certified?
yes.
State offers exhibit number 102 at this time.
No objection.
No objection.
Be admitted.
Now I'm showing you State's Exhibit 103 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Did you say yes?
Yes, I recognize it. I'm just trying to find the person. For Sigfredo Garcia.
And are they also certified by the DMV?
Yes, they are.
An offer into evidence states Exhibit 103 at this time.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Be admitted.
Finally, I want to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 104. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, for Luis Rivera.
And these DMV records for Mr. Rivera, are they all certified by DMV?
Yeah.
And you relied upon them in your analysis?
Yes.
The state offers State's Exhibit 104.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Be admitted.
What, if any, vehicles did Sigfredo Garcia acquire after the homicide of Dan Markel on July 18th, 2014?
May I refer to some notes?
You may.
Okay. Could you repeat the question again?
Yes, I can. What, if any, vehicles did Sigfredo Garcia acquire after the murder of Dan Markel on July 18th of 2014?
Okay. Mr. Garcia purchased a blue Chevrolet Monte Carlo coupe July 26, 2014. He also purchased a yellow and black Honda Racer, which I believe is a motorcycle, on August 22nd, 2014. He also purchased a gold Nissan Maxima sedan four-door on October 17th, 2014.
So from July 26, 2014,
We don't need to repeat what she said, Ms. Norris, if that's what you're about to do.
I want to ask about a time period.
Okay.
So the purchases of those three vehicles by Mr. Garcia spanned what time period?
Within 4 months of the murder.
Okay. What, if any, vehicles did Luis Rivera acquire after the homicide?
Purchased a yellow Suzuki motorcycle on July 28, 2014. He also purchased a green Toyota Camry sedan on July 31st, 2014.
What, if any, vehicles did Catherine McBanwa acquire after the murder?
She acquired a black Lexus sedan four-door on January 23rd, 2016.
Based on the records we just looked at for the Lexus, the title,
Yes.
does it indicate who owned the vehicle prior to Ms. Magbanua?
Yes, that was Harvey Adelson.
Did you look for any record of, in Ms. Magbanua's bank records, or anybody else's records, did you look for any record of payment from Catherine Magbanua for that Lexus?
I did. I looked through all of her accounts to see if there was a check written or even enough cash that had been withdrawn within a reasonable time frame that could have made the purchase. I also checked the deposit records for the Adelsons to see if any of them had a matching deposit that would have been the equivalent of the car that was purchased.
And does the title indicate the amount that was supposedly paid for the Lexus?
Yes, it was $1,700.
So you indicated that you searched through records to find a corresponding withdrawal or check from Ms. Magbanua's accounts that could have been payment for that Lexus. What were your results?
I could not find any record of a payment.
Tell me about your analysis of Mr. Rivera's bank records. When you looked at those records, what kind of patterns or spending habits did you notice for Mr. Rivera?
I did. I had the records for his Chase bank account from May 14th to November 15th. He had a very distinctive pattern to his banking activities. He would be check direct deposited weekly from his employment. Almost immediately, the checks withdrawal for nearly the whole amount of his paycheck would be withdrawn in cash. This caused the auto payments that he had set up through the account to add a number of overdraft charges. There were so many overdraft charges in a month that they actually equated to one paycheck. I did notice that there was a distinctive change in the pattern of his banking activity after the murder.
How so?
How so? Because after the change, he had very little cash withdrawals and no overdraft payments. He left his paychecks in there to pay his automated charges. But that only lasted a couple of months. Between the last large withdrawal would have been July of 2014, and then not again until September 10th, 2014. That banking pattern resumed with the large cash withdrawals and the overdraft charges resumed in November and continued on to the end of the bank records that went another year.
So did you indicate that when you say large cash withdrawals, did you indicate that those were always after a direct deposit of a paycheck?
Yes, as soon as the direct deposit hit his account, he pulled it out. If he had a $500 check that came in, he would pull $400 out in cash. He operated primarily in cash.
And then after that withdrawal would be when the overdrafts
Yes.
would begin happening. You said that the last large withdrawal from Mr. Rivera was on what date in July 2014?
2 days before the murder, July 16, 2014.
And is that the time period that began his failure to withdraw his direct deposit immediately?
Correct.
And that went back to old habits on what date?
The 1st of November.
What would that be indicative of from July 16, 2014 through November of 2014?
It signifies to me that he had an additional source of cash and he was not relying on his payroll to provide cash for himself.
What, you indicated you analyzed Sigfredo Garcia's bank accounts.
I did.
And what time period, I believe you said it was checking and savings, what time period did you have for Mr. Garcia's bank records?
Yet the only available bank records were from June 15 to July of 16.
So June 2015?
June 2015.
Why did you not have any bank records for the time period of the homicide in July of 2014?
The bank records were subpoenaed. We did have one identified, but because the account was closed, there were no responsive documents from the bank.
What about the, I forget what you called it, but the records from Coastal Masonry, what information did those give you?
You said for Garcia.
Yes, sir.
I thought the masonry was Rivera.
They both worked there.
Okay.
Okay, but the records I'm asking you about the Coastal Masonry records for Sigfredo Garcia.
Yes, but his records indicated that he worked sporadically for them. They did go back to 2009, but they would be a couple of months at a time. Did not show a steady work history.
How many, and do the Coastal Masonry records for Mr. Garcia include records of all the payments made by that company to Mr. Garcia for the year 2014?
Yes.
And how many paychecks did he receive from Coastal Masonry in 2014?
I did not actually make that calculation.
Do you have, okay. If I had 1 moment, Judge.
We're about due for a break. Let's take 10 minutes.